Thank you all for being here. First of all, thank you for joining our celebration of World IP Day today. But maybe most importantly, thank you for getting through those long security lines. I know that couldn't have been any fun, so thank you. I'm Keith Coopersmith, the CEO of the Copyright Alliance. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Copyright Alliance, and I see you around, I don't see that many who may be unfamiliar, but if you are, we are the unified voice of the copyright community. We represent the copyright interest of over 2 million individual creators, as well as more than 15,000 organizations across the United States. Now, we all know the benefits, the copyright protection benefits society across the globe by incentivizing creativity and innovation. These universally accepted essential protections make it possible for the world to enjoy the passion and power of music, alongside inspiring works of art, of books, of photos, of music, and so many more works of creativity. At a time when global economies continue to face significant challenges, we need a strong and vibrant copyright law now more than ever to help protect the works of creators of musical works and all other creative genres today and into the future. No one knows this more than our next speaker, who has done more to support the creative community in Congress than just about anyone I know, and very much appreciated it. So I am pleased to introduce Congresswoman Judy Chu, who we are honored to have join us to share opening remarks at our World IP Day panel. Among so many other accomplishments, Congresswoman Chu co-founded the Congressional Creative Rights Caucus, or the CRC for short, a bipartisan caucus that advocates for the copyright protections of those in the creative industries, such as music, film, and visual arts. So today, please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Chu.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. I'm Congressmember Judy Chu, and I'm so thrilled to be here for the Copyright Alliance's World IP Day panel. This year's theme is intellectual property in music, and CEO and Eileen Bramlett and the Copyright Alliance team have put together this incredible panel of artists and experts from across the music industry. And I'm honored that we, the Creative Rights Caucus of Congress, or the CRC, is able to sponsor and host this very important discussion in this site. Well, it's great that we are, in fact, celebrating World IP Day because it's our opportunity to acknowledge that America's creative industries rely not just on strong copyright protections here at home, but on fair treatment of their works abroad. In 2023, copyright industries contributed $273 billion in U.S. exports. That's more than the pharmaceutical industry and the agricultural sector combined. The artistic works of American musicians and other artists are in demand throughout the entire world, and that international market helps these industries to support 11.6 million American jobs that are spread across every congressional district of this country. But when other countries tolerate piracy and intellectual property theft, that's money coming directly out of these workers' pockets. As a member of the House Ways and Means Committee, which has jurisdiction over international trade, I'm working to protect creators from piracy and other trade barriers. And that's especially important now as other countries contemplate ways to retaliate against the global tariffs that have been imposed by this administration. And it also gets to the heart of why I founded the bipartisan Congressional Creative Rights Caucus back in 2013. It was after the defeat of the Stop Online Piracy Act, and I realized that not enough of my colleagues truly understood how much work goes into making a record, composing a soundtrack, or turning any creative idea into reality. Just think about the job supported every time a musician records a new album in a studio or goes on tour and plays concerts in cities across the country. And most of these are middle-class jobs that pay good wages. So I am glad to say that our caucus has expanded. We are not only bipartisan here in the House, but we have a Senate Congressional Rights Caucus host, and so we are bipartisan and bicameral. So our influence has extended even further. So it's critical that members and staff hear directly from the creative workforce industry leaders like those that we have today to understand how Congress's support for copyright protections at home and around the world make it possible for creators to do what they do best. So thank you to all the panelists and to the Copyright Alliance for making this possible, and happy World IP Day.
Thank you, Congressman Chu, for those excellent reports. Also, David Silver, thank you very much. And Talia, coming in, thank you very much for helping with document event. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
I also want to thank our other co-hosts here at this event, many of whom are actually Copyright Alliance members, including the American Association of Independent Music, or A2IM, the Artists' Rights Alliance, ARA, the Church Music Publishers Association, CMPA, the DC Jazz Fest, Matador Records, Music Artists Coalition, National Association of Broadcasters, National Music Publishers Association, the Recording Academy, Recording Industry Association of America, Society of Composers and Lyricists, the Songwriters Guild of North America, and the Songwriters of North America. And that's a very, very long list, but believe it or not, we still have other members in addition to those. So while the Copyright Alliance represents a variety of copyright owners of different types of copyrighted works, today we are here to celebrate one of them, which is music. Because the theme selected by World Intellectual Property Organization, or WIPO, is Music and IP Celebrating Creativity. Music has always played a unique role in connecting people, in inspiring change, and driving cultural growth. Today's panel provides us with an important opportunity to recognize how copyright protections enable musicians, songwriters, composers, publishers, PROs, record labels, and so many more who work in the music ecosystem to thrive, supporting not just their creative expression, but also the global creative economy that their works powers. So you'll hear a lot more about this in today's panel. So let me kick things off by introducing our moderator today, Miriam Lord. Miriam is the Associate Register of Copyrights and Director of Public Information and Education at the U.S. Copyright Office. And she'll be moderating the session. In her role, Miriam oversees the Office of Public Information and Education, which provides authoritative information about copyright law to the public, implements the office's communication plan, publishes comprehensive written and audiovisual materials, develops education and outreach programs, responds to public inquiries about office policies and practice, and pretty much she runs the office. So Miriam, thank you very much for moderating. Now I'm going to hand things off to you.
Well, thank you so much, Keith. I appreciate it. We should give Keith the team again. All right. Well, I want to take just a quick moment to thank Copyright Alliance and all of its partners, and also thank my office, which is represented by a number of folks in the room, for supporting this event. It's such a timely place and time to have this event. It's World IP Day season, with World IP Day being on the 26th. It's on a Saturday this year, which meant that we could enjoy it all weekend and into this week. So thank you for joining us today. Like Keith mentioned, I come from the Copyright Office, and I'm here to represent all the things that we do, and I'm just so pleased to be joined by such an illustrious panel, one member of whom, the artist in question, will be moving in dramatically midway through, like any good artist should. We could be interrupted by artists, by members of Congress, by enthusiastic fans, and we'll just buckle in for the ride. So thanks for having us. I'm going to introduce the panel, and then we'll just dive right in. And hopefully, once we get through a long list of questions, we'll have a little bit of time to be able to hit. So we'll get started. So down the row, I'm going to introduce Ashley Irwin, who's president of Society of Composers and Lyricists and Employment Award winner. Todd Dupler, who's the Chief Advocacy and Public Policy Officer at the Recording Academy. Shannon Sorensen, who's the Senior VP of Legal and Business Affairs at the NMPA. Patrick Amory, who's president of Matador Records. And Charlie Sanders, who's a music industry attorney and Songwriters Guild of America and the National Music Council of the USA. So I'm pleased to have you all. We will be joined later by Mumu Fresh, who's a Grammy-nominated singer and artist. I'm going to kick it to each one of you in turn to talk a little bit about what makes music such a powerful and meaningful part of all of our lives, and what ways does copyright help creators to continue making the music that we love. So I thought we could just go right down the line. We'll start actually with you. A few comments.
I got the wrong seat,
on
didn't I? I'm
that.
gonna
I'll just mix it
First,
up. Don't worry, actually. You got you.
that didn't come. What makes it so? Well, that's a reflection. That's a reflection of what's going on in the world, and it's how it touches us, and then in turn we can touch other people in certain ways. It's what creates memories for people for particular occasions, for particular moments in time that resonate with you. It has so many functions. It's, as we were discussing in one of the offices yesterday, it has soft power. It has incredible soft power in the international space. That this music that we create in this country, and as you can tell by my accent, I came here a long time ago, 35 years ago, to be a part of this industry, because this is the industry that exports to the world, that touches everyone. If you go on the planet, you hear this music, and that's got me a long time ago when I was about 8 years old. So I'll turn it to Tom.
Yeah, I was just about to say exactly. No, I think, obviously everything he said is true. I'm reminded, it becomes cliche that music is a bridge builder or something that unites and brings us together. But we see that firsthand. Just 3 weeks ago, we celebrated our Grammys on the Hill event. And it's amazing. You have this small room in the Hamilton Live where you have members of Congress from both parties at a deeply polarized, divisive time in Washington, but they're all in there together, enjoying music, singing along, clapping along. And so it's a reminder that the cliche is true. When we say that music helps bridge differences and bring people together, we see it actually happen. And I think to the second part of the question, copyright is critical. The Supreme Court has called copyright the engine of free expression. And it's the thing that makes you know that being able to express your art, but when you express your art, you might actually be able to make a living from it. That it's actually something that you created that belongs to you, that you have ownership of. Copyright is the guarantee that that's true. And that's why it's important that we celebrate it, not just on World IP Day, but every day of peace.
We have copyright on this break.
Yeah. It's hard to say something that hasn't been said, but as I was this morning trying to figure out exactly how to answer this question and listening to my pump up music for speaking in public, that's the thing, right? Music conveys emotion. It transcends language in terms of how we communicate and connect with other people. And I think it's so important. Music's what makes you excited, to get out of bed, or you're in your car and you're going to turn on that one song that you can't stop listening to. It adds so much depth. And I think, what Todd said is very true. Copyright is the way that musicians can make a living. It's not a coincidence that U.S. has one of the strongest copyright systems and that we're the largest exporter of music in the world. We have the most professional musicians, and they can have those jobs because of copyright.
What to say that hasn't already been said? There actually is something. I think everybody's emphasized the celebratory and unifying effects of music, and that is absolutely true and very important to us and our artists. But also, since we represent a lot of underground musicians, underground rock musicians, electronic, experimental people, they make provocative music. They make music that is designed to make you think, to grab your attention and to maybe upset some of your assumptions. And I think that is a vital role for music in society. As for the role of copyright, I think that our label prides itself on helping people who make music that is not part of the mainstream as something that you can make a living that would not be possible without copyright.
Charlie.
Yeah, so with the permission of the chair, I'm going to go a tiny bit longer because this is what I teach at New York University for the law school and for the music business program there. My role there for the past 3 decades has been to instill in students who are going into the music industry pride in the fact that they're going into the American music industry. It is utterly extraordinary, and we overlook this quite a bit. We are well into the 2nd century, not of U.S. leadership in music creation, but of U.S. global domination in terms of its influence through music. When Ashley mentioned soft power, there are a couple of illustrative examples that I'd just like to leave you with. So indulge me for 1 minute. Certainly everybody has talked about the concept that American outreach of its ideals is aided enormously by the emotional power of music. But every single social movement in the United States, every single moment of despair, like the Great Depression, every moment of need for inspiration, like the Second World War, has been aided immeasurably by music. If we reach out to the rest of the world through music, Billy Joel told the story, and this is the first example of 2, when he was inducted to the Songwriters Hall of Fame of being the first songwriter, singer, musician, band leader to play behind the Iron Curtain after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And he was extremely anxious and worried that he would get up on stage and nobody would know who the hell he was and what he was singing. Not only was he greeted with warmth and ovation after ovation, but a non-English speaking crowd sang his lyrics back to him in English phonetically and knew exactly what he was saying. He talked about that being an epiphany, that the Cold War was over and all of the intervening years between the end of the Second World War and then had been an outreach through music to the people behind the Iron Curtain and what that meant to him personally and to the United States as a nation. The story, of course, we can go through Abraham Lincoln and using Amazing Grace along with, Frederick Douglass and Henry Beecher Stowe. There are many stories about the Depression and Yip Harburg and Brother Can You Spare a Dime, keeping people from committing suicide. And the Second World War is probably the best example yet, so I will leave you with this one. You probably could guess what the greatest song, according to poll after poll, or the most beloved anyway, in history is. It's Over the Rainbow. Poll after poll shows that. When you think about the lyrics to Over the Rainbow, most people take away hope and warmth. That's not what Yip Harburg and Harold Arlen were writing in 1938. The lyrics, when you look at them closely, are a cry of despair as to what is coming and what the world is about to endure. And the last lines of that song, if you recall, are, if happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why oh why can't I? That was Harburg, who had written Brother Can You Spare a Dime, saying, I don't have the answer, but I see terrible, terrible things happening. He didn't expect an answer to the prayer of going over the rainbow, but 2 writers in Los Angeles answered it anyway. They wrote a song. This is Nat Burton and I'm trying to remember but it's not important. They wrote a song called There'll Be Bluebirds Over the White Cliffs of Dover when the world was free. They started a conversation among lyricists back and forth across the Atlantic, and Vera Lynn sang that song. And those 2 songs became the backbone of maintaining morale during the Second World War, probably the lowest moment of the last 2,000 years. That's what soft power of music is. So yes, it helps the trade balance of the United States. Yes, provides millions of jobs. And yes, all of that is important, but it pales into comparison for what music has done for the United States as a force of good in the world. And we are so proud to be part of that. And we thank members of Congress and staffers for making it possible for the melting pot to have created the greatest repertoire of music and song in the history of the world.
Thank you, Shannon. So, Todd, I'm going to pass this one to you first. And we might loop back to it, but just from your perspective and where you sit, how do songwriters and artists and producers and engineers collaborate and work together to bring a song to life? And then Shannon will have you talk a little bit about culture.
The Recording Academy represents songwriters and composers, musicians and performers and producers and engineers. And what you find is that a lot of times they're all the same person, that so many creators wear more than one hat. They can be a writer, a performer, and a producer, or some combination of those things. So kind of in the old traditional model, one way of doing it would be a songwriter writes a song, they work with a publisher, who then takes that song to a label or to artists and says, hey, I think this is a great song for you to record. The artist and label say, yes, that's a great idea. They arrange for the artist to come into a recording studio and they select collaborators of who they want to produce this album, who are the musicians that are going to perform with them, and they create a recording. But that's only one way that it happens. I'll say one quick note on the role of producers and engineers. A producer is often most akin to like the director of a film. They provide creative direction and kind of structure and organization to how a recording gets made. So you think of Quincy Jones working with Michael Jackson, or Sir George Martin working with the Beatles, Jack Antonoff working with Taylor Swift. They're there to serve the artist, but they also help provide the unique sound and creative direction to go with that artist. The music of Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis has a very distinctive characteristic to it, for example. But again, I think because of technology, and it's really democratized how music gets made. So someone like Billie Eilish and Phineas can sit in a room together at home and make a whole record. And they've written it, they've performed it, and they've produced it all themselves. And so again, I think the advent of technology has made making music more accessible to more people. And if you want, and if you have the resources to go into a great studio and hire great musicians and talent to make an album with you, that's one way to do it. Or there's this whole spectrum and continuum of how to make music. I think we'll never lose the collaboration aspect. I think something about music is collaborative. But again, there's just more ways than ever to make that music.
Actually, before we get to you, Shannon, do you mind talking a little bit about your own process?
Sure. My creative process begins with the phone call of someone ringing me and saying, I want music for a show or a film or whatever. So I'm not thinking about, unlike what Todd's thinking about, I've worked in that way, at writing songs with other songwriters. But in a commercial way for soundtracks, underscore, it's slightly different. The phone will come either directly from someone you work with, or an introduction through an agent, or a reference from somebody. And then you become the vessel as a creator, musical creator, to provide the musical vision for the director. It's not your project, it's his project or her project. And so it's up to you to be able to interpret what it is they're trying to achieve from the rest of the film. You're part of the filmmaking crew of that. And that, becomes quite challenging sometimes, because you don't necessarily need them or want them to speak in musical terms to you, because in a lot of cases they're musically illiterate. They're better off speaking to you in emotional terms. And then you provide answers, musical answers, and you have constraints, be it budgetary or time or whatever. They might want to, create the next Star Wars, but they've got, $300. So, when it's not going to happen. So you have to be able to be adaptable enough to provide something that supports their vision based on all of these other parameters. Does that sort of cover, and still be creative? And still be creative. Yeah.
Okay, the role of a music publisher. To understand music publishers, you have to understand that there are two different copyrights in every song that you hear. One is the musical composition copyright, and the other is the sound recording. So when you hear "I Will Always Love You" as recorded by Whitney Houston, Dolly Parton obviously wrote the song, so those are two separate copyrights: Dolly Parton, the song, and Whitney Houston, the sound recording. Music publishers work with songwriters and composers, and they're basically the business partners of songwriters. So what they will do is shop your songs around to record labels. They will pitch it for use in film or advertisements. And they also do the protection side of things, in addition to the commercialization side. Enforcing against unauthorized uses, doing takedowns online when you see pirate sites, things like that. So basically what music publishers do is they do all of the administrative and business side so that the creators can do the creative side.
Thank you so much. All right, we're just going to roll it down. Patrick, talk to us a little bit about record labels and how they work with the artists in it.
Okay, record labels. Shannon just talked about the two different rights that are inherent in a music recording. We're the other half. So the record labels represent performing artists who make recordings. And we do many of the same things that music publishers do for songwriters for recording artists. I think maybe a little bit of the difference is that whereas songwriters tend to collaborate and sort of work on multiple records all over the place, recording artists tend to make a record. For us, usually it's still an album, and that record comes out and needs to be, if it's physical, it needs to be manufactured and distributed. Digitally, it needs to go to streaming services. It needs to be promoted. It needs to be marketed. There's a whole 18 to 24-month cycle. The artist will usually go on tour. That's a third part of the business. We do not participate in the live side. So it's our job to work that record and hopefully take the artist to the next level, commercially speaking, and to be able to translate their creative vision into a story for press, for radio, for social media, for influencers, for whoever is out there enabling music discovery.
We're going to talk a little bit about the Music Modernization Act and how it's helped musicians, publishers, and others in the music ecosystem. So I'm going to pitch that to Todd, Shannon, and Charlotte. So in that order, something like that. Tell us about what it is, tell us what it does.
Sure. I'll start and let everybody else fill in and clean up. I think the Music Modernization Act was significant in a few ways. One, it was kind of the most significant copyright legislation in a generation that had actually been passed by Congress and signed into law. And longer than that, really, for a significant update to music licensing. We had reached a point, because there had been so many seismic changes of how music was being created and distributed and consumed, that when you looked at the music licensing regime, if you were to start over from scratch, you would not have built the system that we were currently using. And yet it was like, okay, this is what we have. How do we modernize it and update it? I think one thing that in the long view of the MMA that was so important was that it took stakeholders from across the whole breadth of the music industry. So I think, as you've heard just from us going down the line, there are so many different silos of people in the music industry that do different things and play different roles. And it's so hard to pass legislation in Congress if you're only focused on one narrow piece of the pie. What was unique about the MMA is that it really was the entire industry coming together. So it didn't just solve one problem, it actually solved multiple problems, both on the sound recording side, on the publishing side, and even for producers and engineers. So I'll map out kind of three big chunks, and then I'll let you guys jump in if you want, to the extent you want to. But certainly the most significant piece of the MMA dealt with publishing and how songwriters and publishers were paid by digital services. Again, the way streaming services had evolved was not fit with the current copyright system, and there had to be a better way to be able to license music and collect the royalties due for that music. So that was one big problem. It also dealt with the royalty rates that the CRB sets for PROs and for public performance of songs. It also dealt on the sound recording side with a loophole in the law with recordings made prior to 1972 and the ability to get compensation for those recordings. And it actually added producers and engineers to copyright law for the first time and gave them the right to collect certain royalties for digital works as well. And I think if we had tried to do any one of those things in a vacuum, we would not have been as successful in getting the legislation passed. But it was all of us joining together to do something more holistic and comprehensive that made the law successful. And I think is a good test model to show how we can get things done in the future.
Yeah, Shannon, try.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that Todd said. So to dive in a little bit more on what MMA did and how it changed things. In the music publishing space, we've been under a compulsory license since 1909 for the musical composition reproduction, right? So that's sheet music, CDs, things like that. The government sets the rate, and anyone can get a license, but they have to file a notice that they're getting a license and they have to pay. Historically, record labels were the ones that did that, or sheet music publishers. And then when we moved into the digital age, it got a lot more complicated because streaming services got their music from record labels, not from music publishers, and they didn't always have all the data to know who to pay. And under the previous system, they could file a notice with the Copyright Office if they couldn't locate the owner, and then they didn't have to pay anything at all. Now we have one central clearinghouse for all of those licenses. Everything gets paid, so there's no free streaming anymore, or rateless streaming is what we would call it, when musical compositions were played but not paid. Now everything is properly accounted for. We have one centralized clearinghouse that does all of the data processing, all of the matching of sound recording data to musical composition copyright owners, and make sure that everyone gets paid. So that's the big piece, and that's the 1,000-foot view. If you have more questions about MMA, we can definitely dive into them, and almost anyone in this room could probably answer that question. So that's on the music publishing side. On the record label side, it extended copyright for pre-1972 sound recordings. So a lot of legacy artists who were continuing to tour because they couldn't make any money off of digital radio when their music was played online, suddenly had another income stream. So those were the kind of big changes. And in terms of the lessons of MMA, the big takeaways, I think I agree with Todd. It was such a massive thing for the whole music industry to come together, and it wasn't only the music industry, but it was also the tech side. We had Spotify, Amazon, Google, everyone was on board together, and that was a massive advocacy effort and hugely important, updates to the law that it was excellent to have Congress get on board with and help us pass.
Yeah, I think that the independent music creator community has heard the message from Capitol Hill loud and clear that collaboration among all of the players in the industry is incredibly important. And that members of Congress and staffers have heard the message back that absolutely, but please try to remember that songwriters and composers and recording artists speak for themselves. We have a system that works wonderfully in terms of creating value. Unfortunately, one of the byproducts of that system is that there are conflicts of interest that are unavoidable. And that's the world we live in. We ask that recognition of those conflicts of interest result in legislation that sets up everybody for success. That there's a fairness and a level playing field in each individual piece of legislation that supports the copyright industries, that take into account that some players in the industry are more powerful than others and therefore need a different level of protection. So, I think that we're more than happy to join hands as an industry and every sector represented, but that we also ask that there be sensitivity, that the devil is in the details frequently, and that shareholder rights sometimes get mixed up with music creator rights when we're dealing with corporations, and that's just, part of the system. But we think that you guys are sensitive and certainly attentive enough to accommodate that.
I'll say, I think two things came out of what Charlie said. One, as we said earlier, music is collaborative, so music policy should be collaborative as well. I think MMA testifies to that. I think also, just the little that we've been able to dig under the surface, music licensing and copyright law is so endlessly complex. And there are a handful of members like Congresswoman Judy Chu who do understand it and take the time to learn it. But the vast majority of members of Congress just don't have the ability or the bandwidth to learn copyright law and music licensing. And that's why it's so incumbent that the stakeholders, like all of us around the table, do come together to fully bake these policy ideas and proposals and have something that's worked out that we do all agree to. Because the members of Congress don't know the intricacies of our industry or of the law. And so they are really counting on us to be able to give them good information and say, look, we've all talked about this, we've all worked this through, this is something that we all agree on. It's okay for people to wear.
Thank you. I'm going to put a quick plug in for some materials that help explain all of this that I just have here in front of me from the Copyright Office about how songwriters, composers, and performers get paid. We keep all of this online. It's highly visual, and if you are interested in learning more about it, I have some materials up here. But the office and stakeholders and members of Congress over the last several years have worked really hard to pump that information out, thanks to some people in groups.
When you say highly visual, I assume that means there's pictures, and I love
You've got the guitars, Todd. You've got
Little arrows.
I need a
tiny little arrow.
I need you down with that. All right, well, we're going to pivot just a little bit and keeping in the policy area to everyone's favorite topic. We never leave the room without talking about, which is artificial intelligence. So buckle up. We're just going to give you all a chance to talk about this. We'll start with Charlie and work our way back this way, but be cautious of your time, Charlie. How has AI impacted what you or your members do, and what can Congress do to help the music industry as AI continues to evolve?
I hate to resort to hyperbole right off the bat, but we talk about existential threats to creators, and it, in this case, happens to be true. The unregulated use of generative AI is undoubtedly a threat to industries across the board, but the creative industries especially. I want to make clear that creators use AI all the time in the creative process. There is an enthusiasm to support the advance of technology. The question becomes, what kind of controls do we need to place on that? And we have been kicking around, and I won't go into detail, but a sui generis right for compensation and for control in regard to generative AI specifically, and specifically in regard to music, but of course it can extend to other creative works. And I'll be happy to go into that with anybody who'd like to, and I'm sure that Ashley will have more to say about that. But to compensate creators on ingestion of works or so-called training, and also on output of basically what amount to derivative works, is only fair. We would love Silicon Valley to make trillions of dollars. And we're not trying to stop them from doing so. We just don't want to be ripped off.
This to the point that everybody uses. Everybody's been using AI for ages, right? If you've ever used Photoshop, used Content Verifill, you've been using AI since 2006 or something. It's just the same thing. To Charlie's point, tons of artists use AI. We have one recording artist who trained an AI on his own discography for the new record to see what it would put out and use that. What he didn't do is go and use somebody else's music and incorporate that into his music and not pay for it or get it licensed or get permission. And I think that's the big difference, right? I think the tech industries historically, in the name of innovation, have gone ahead and move fast and break things in order to figure it out, right? We know that various big tech companies, we don't need to name names, used music for ages without licensing on the basis that we were given an opt-out right via the DMCA, where you could say, no, we need to take that down, whatever, which is almost impossible to administer. with AI, we don't want to make that mistake again. What we want is opt-in. So creators have the ability to opt in and say, yes, train the AI on my music, give me transparency, and give me compensation at the end for whatever comes out of it. And with that sort of regime in place, I think most of our artists would be happy to be involved.
Yeah, what's been said about musicians using AI for a really long time already is certainly true. There's a lot of digital tools that people use in the creative process that are informed by AI. There's also algorithms to boost, your recommendations so that you're hearing music that you like. There's a lot of things that have facilitated more consumption of music that you like, and the better production of music. On the generative side, what our members are really worried about is generative AI companies taking music that was made by humans, training an AI with it, and then having that AI make music that's going to compete with humans and possibly drive them out of the market, particularly since the cost to produce music by an AI is significantly lower than a human producing it. So the big concern is, are we going to see a replacement in jobs from taking our music away to train our own replacements? That's what we're worried about. We're also seeing that kind of start to play out a little bit in the digital media space. You have seen some cases where people are using AI to put a lot of tracks onto Spotify and to commit streaming fraud, basically racking up fake streams to get a portion of the pool rather than having that go legitimately to human creators whose music is being listened to by other people. So we've seen, that's kind of the early impacts. The job threat is probably a longer term impact that we're waiting to see how that plays out, and we're really trying to prevent that from happening. I think what Congress can do to help us is incentivize the free market licensing. So every time there's been a new technology developed, where we usually end up is a place where we are licensing. So in the case of unnamed social media platforms who didn't take a license for a long time, now they have licenses in the music industry. TikTok has a license with record labels and music publishers, so you can use music on TikTok, and that's created a lot of cool ways that you can interact with the music that you love and use it in new ways. We want to see that happen with AI, and the best thing that Congress can do is incentivize and promote licensing agreements between copyright owners and tech companies so that we can develop an ecosystem that works for everybody, not an ecosystem that makes winners and losers.
We're going to take a quick pause so we'll get back to this second conversation.
All right, pause in the action for more action here. So we are really, really pleased to have Congressman Ben Cline join us. He represents Virginia's 6th Congressional District, and he's joined us to deliver comments for our World ID Day event today. Congressman Cline is a member of the Judiciary Committee, Appropriations Committee, and Budget Committee, and most importantly, he is a long time supporter of the copyright community, and we're honored to have him here today. So with that, please join me in welcoming Congressman.
Well, it's good to see so many friendly faces, familiar from many years involved in these issues. And yes, I am not old, but nobody else is as young as the day they started these many years ago. But this is an issue that has been, at the forefront for so many years. And my predecessor in Congress, Bob Goodlatte, was a champion of intellectual property rights, the recognition that these rights are the only rights that are secured in the actual body of the Constitution themselves, which I carry around with me. But I'm sorry that I wasn't able to be here to hear more of the panel, because this is a great opportunity to talk to a larger audience about the importance of these issues to their everyday lives. And whether it's when they wake up and check their phones, or whether they're celebrating special family time. We've got Sunday movie nights and at my house, and those are cherished and would not be possible without the great work of so many in this room. So as you all have been discussing, intellectual property plays an essential role in supporting creativity and innovation, and ensures that those who bring music to life, songwriters, performers, producers, and others, are protected and empowered. Music is not just entertainment, it's a reflection of who we are as people, and it has the power to connect us in ways few other things can, or, in the case of my twin 13-year-old daughters, divide us. Usually when we're in the car and we have to talk about who's in control of the radio. But we can usually find some channel that we can agree on, or if all else fails, Dad puts it on the bluegrass channel, and they stew in the backseat. But songwriters in particular are the heart and soul of this process. They pour their lives and experiences and passion into every note, every lyric, and every melody. And it's essential that their rights are safeguarded so that they can continue to create and share their stories with the world. As someone who's proud to advocate for the rights of songwriters, I can't emphasize enough how critical it is that we protect the intellectual property that allows artists and creators to thrive in an ever-evolving industry. And it just seems like it keeps evolving faster and faster. But the work done by organizations like the Copyright Alliance is so vital in helping ensure that those who contribute to music's magic are compensated fairly and able to sustain their craft. So as we celebrate here today, and I hope I can stay with you for a little while, let's remember that the beat of IP is not just about the business of music, it's about honoring and valuing the artists who make it all possible. So thank you for your time, thank you for your passion, and thank you for your commitment to advocating and for advancing music, creativity, and intellectual property. Thank you all.
Well, thank you so much. We're going to move into the exciting second half of it.
I'm going to be a fly on the wall. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. We are shifting from one gig to another because our resident artist is just swept in around.
Sorry.
And just to bring up to speed, this is the Brush. Probably about your big name. Who's a Grammy-nominated singer and artist, and we just to catch you up, we've been talking to Ben Cline folks a little bit about the process of music production. We were talking about AI. We're going to wrap it up, and then we're going to talk a little about your panel, and then we'll close everything out. So, just to re-ask the question that got us here, how has AI impacted what you or your members do, and what can Congress do to help the music industry as AI continues to evolve? So, let's start with Todd. We'll have a couple minutes to think about it. Against the Ashley
Well, first I'll also thank Congressman Cline to recognize him as co-chair of the Songwriters Caucus. Thank you for that.
Glad to participate.
I think the story of recorded music is the story of innovation of technology. So going back to multi-track recording, drum beats and synthesizers, Pro Tools software. Creators have always embraced new technology to find new ways to create music, and AI is no exception. AI is going to expand opportunities for more people to create music in new ways. But at the same time, there are concerns about what are the appropriate guardrails to make sure that we are protecting the human creativity that's at the core of the music that we love. And I think the fundamental principle on World IP Day and with the Copyright Alliance is, again, the work that we create is ours. And how do we protect it and make sure that we maintain control over how it's being used by these new technologies? I like to think there are kind of three buckets of how AI issues are being addressed. One is regulatory, things that are being regulated, things that are being litigated, things that can be legislated. I think on the regulation side, for example, I'd be curious to tee it back to you once you get down the line to talk about some of the work the Copyright Office is doing on the copyrightability of AI works. I think certainly the question of how models use copyrighted works is one that's being litigated very aggressively at the moment, and one that we care about. And I think in the area of legislation, again, we see things around transparency and tracking, but certainly one that we've been most focused on and other stakeholders have been is the use of digital replicas and how AI can mimic and create lookalikes and sound-alikes of an artist or a creator, whether it's creating music that they never themselves created or video content or other forms of content that take an artist and repurpose them or use them in ways that they have no control over. And that's an area where there is no federal legislation or protection or property right in your own person. There are such rights at the state level, but they're not developed to keep up with AI and digital replicates. And so that's certainly one space where we've been working very aggressively on behalf of our artists and working with the RIAA and others. And I think pointing back to the MMA model, it's one where we've been able to work with stakeholders across multiple industries, including the movie studios, the tech companies, and others, so that we can have a united front and say, hey, we've worked together to find a solution to these problems.
All right,
I'm going to give you a little bit of the good and the bad. The impact of AI for us, I mean, I can go back almost 30 years thinking of a very, very basic AI software programs we were using to create music. But now the good aspect is that we can take something like a theme or some kind of vocabulary we're using for a film or a television show and come up with so many variations very quickly. This means we can work faster and harder and quicker and deliver faster and therefore work on more things. So that's the positive. It means that they expect more from us. They expect us to work harder and faster and longer hours and all that because they know we can do this. But it's good because when you have writer's block and you have all sorts of things going on and you still have to make a delivery date, you have the tools that can assist you and all you have to do is make decisions. But it's those decisions that are so important because when someone comes to a composer to write a score, they're coming to them because of their taste in music. They like your taste. It's not the machine's taste, it's your taste. So what you feed into the machine of your music, you dictate what you accept on the other side of that. When a machine does that without any kind of oversight, that's when there's a problem. And one of the things that has happened, or is going to happen, and is starting to happen, in our world where we all are in a work-for-hire environment and don't directly control our copyrights, there are already streaming services who are building libraries to put us out of business, and we know them. And some of them have even declared that by 2026, there'll be certain types of programming that they won't be using composers for anymore. They'll just be regurgitating what they already have. And so that's the downside. So there's the two sides of it.
All right. Tell us how things are from your perspective.
It is frightening. It is frightening because I think artists already have to fight for their value in the marketplace all the time, having to prove why we matter, why our voice is unique, why our perspective, why our stories matter, why lived experience matters, why your 20,000 hours that you put in learning your instrument, why that matters. And it will become, it won't, more and more it won't matter. And I especially think as a music educator as well, I'm seeing more and more from young people that they don't see the value in studying because it's just so easy for them. They don't want to be great at their craft because they told me it's not necessary. And I feel like that's dangerous for the future of creators and of humans, just the human mind. Like there's something that helps us evolve. Creativity helps us evolve. Just the neurons that shoot when we start to be creative. Like it helps the human mind expand. It helps our humanity, expand. And that's concerning that the next generation may not think creativity is important. And they may not want to do the work. They already don't want to do the work, and there's so many life lessons in doing the work. I'll say like as a young child, my grandmother taught me to bead, right? My grandmother's a Choctaw. So as a kid, I would create my regalia for the powwows, right? And so I had to do like barrettes and, all these different things I had to make beadwork for. And she would always tell me to slow down and take each step in the process, right? And don't try to rush through and find a quicker way to get it done, because there's so many lessons, even in your mistakes, right? It teaches you not to aim to be perfect. You learn your own unique style, which is your own like spiritual identity. Like, so all of those different lessons, and I didn't get it at 7 years old, but like later on, as a creative, I'm understanding how much I grow as a human through my creative process. It's not just about let me rush so I can produce for capitalism, but you know, my creativity is not just, you know, for capitalism. It's also for my own spiritual process. And if I negate that and there's no reason for that, well, I am preventing my own evolution and expansion as a human being, you know.
Well, thanks for that. I'll say just a quick word in response to Todd, what the office is doing in the AI area. The copyright office has put plug. This is the comprehensive initiative around artificial intelligence and copyright right now. You can see all of that on our website, copyright.gov/AI. We put out 2 parts on reports so far, covering facial replicas last summer, covering copyrightability outputs earlier in January, and then, of course, providing supplemental guidance on top of the 2023 guidance about that registration process soon. So right now we're working on the liability-related issues, and that report should come out soon. But one of the things that we didn't talk about, and I think this comes into as well, is the human element and the importance of that human element. So I think that that's a good bridge to let Mumu Fresh answer that question from the beginning. Tie us all together about what your creative process is. How do you create music and create? And then we'll have a full wrap-up on it.
Many different ways. I love when it comes naturally, right? When it comes through me unexpectedly. Maybe I'm driving or taking a shower or sitting at the river, and I have this spark of inspiration that comes through me, and I have to like hurry up and get it out, you know, before it's gone. I think that that's like the purest form. But also because, you know, I write music for a living, also sometimes I have to sit in the studio and, you know, I have a deadline and I have a theme already, you know, selected, and a track that's been selected, you know, by the publishing company, and I have to delve into my experiences and think about what way has this story not been told before. You know, I try to find out where is the void. We've heard there's a million songs about love, but in what way can I make it more visible, more unique? What way can I share a perspective that, you know, may land in a person's heart in a way that lasts, that stays with them forever, you know, that they revisit years from now and it means something a little different for them. So as a writer, like I'm thinking about how my writing will impact the human race. I mean, there are times when I may have something that's just like cool, that'll be cool to say, but I have to think about, but also how will that impact the listener, you know? And sometimes if I don't think it will impact the listener in the best way that I want to contribute to humanity, that I won't, you know, I'll just decide like I don't want to put that in here. I'm very big on affirmations. I really believe that words create worlds. And so I'm just mindful about frequency and energy and what I'm putting out to the world. I love to collaborate and work with other writers and have conversations, compare our experiences, and come up with ways to combine all of our experiences into a recording. I find a lot of times because of artists are trying to figure out who's getting more percentages, sometimes that kills the creativity. You know, it does. You know, people start getting a little selfish and like, I want to keep that word, so I'll get a little bit more. But I really love to work with artists who put the art first, and they put the legacy first. You know, like we really want to make a great song that you can live to, that children can be born to, people can get married to, people transition, you know, pass away to. Like, that's my favorite way to create music that'll last forever, that means something more than us, you know, it's bigger than us. And sometimes that's challenging because we may write for companies that don't care about that at all. You know, they're just like, we want something that's with this trend for the moment, and we have to try and find a balance between, you know, our creative impulses and innovations and and what pays our bills. But yeah, so the process can be many different ways, but that's my favorite way to create.
Thank you so much for sharing. Is there anything in response, just in terms of the artistic process, production, the business, that any of you want to respond to? I know we've got into the block. Okay. I think I'm going to flip some questions here and just talk a little bit about infringements. We talked all about the investment that goes into a piece of music from the artistic generation over here, with a collaborative nature being really complicated all through the process of design and production and release and promotion, and just talking about all of the rights that are a part of that, getting that music out there into the world, and then who gets paid so that they pay their bills and create their world. If a musician's work is infringed, what options and resources can they use to respond? I'll reserve some time to talk about the CCD at the end, of course, but I was wondering, starting with you, if you've ever had that experience before, and if so, what have you done about it?
Normally it's too expensive to do anything about it. I'm being honest. There has been times, not necessarily where someone, I'll say there have been times where I have seen my influence on something, but you may not really be able to say like these words, right? Then there's been other times where I've had a whole song that I recorded, on tour. One night we're all jamming, and someone records it, and now it's in a movie, and no one speaks to me about it. I'm watching a movie, and I hear my voice like, wait a minute, that's me, And so, I did have to get a lawyer and talk to the movie house and get payment. It took a long time, and it was hard, and I probably spent more money than I received from it. So I think a lot of times it doesn't always feel like it's worth it to fight for it, which is unfortunate, because sometimes people, they bet on that you won't get it right, so that becomes challenging, and it's a balance, because I don't want to be the kind of artist that's so afraid to collaborate with other people for that reason, because sometimes you'll miss out on the greatest opportunities, but also trying to make sure there are some safeguards, just talking to whoever is on the admin side, like, hey, so where's the paperwork, what's our arrangement, right? And a lot of artists don't like to do that because it kills the vibe. Yeah. So that's always a tricky, and some artists are actually, like, they're really offended by it. I mean, there's a range of emotions that come with a person asking, and I find, in particular as a woman, it's particularly off-putting when I ask about what are the financial arrangements here, what's the business of this, but it's something that we just have to continue to educate each other, because sometimes people don't like to ask because we're not educated about it, and we don't want to expose that we're not educated about it. We don't know how the process should work.
Shannon, you want to talk a little bit about this, being that business, all right?
For sure. So my organization does a lot of enforcement lawsuits on behalf of music publishers. And they're a little bit in a different space than the unauthorized derivative, where you made a song and someone's remixed it or lifted your lyrics or something like that. That is often resolved between the companies, and if it's not resolved between the companies, then it goes to court. But there's a lot of other types of infringement, like a lot of what we deal with now is digital piracy. Websites that don't have licenses to have music on there, that have music, are selling it or offering it for download, or social media sites, or people that are using music in ads on social media but not paying for it. The first tool in your toolbox is a DMCA takedown notice, but that's tricky because you send a notice and they have to take it down, but there's nothing that prevents them from re-uploading it. So a lot of people do takedown notices, but that's typically on a bigger company scale. Most individual creators or small businesses don't have the time or the resources to do that type of online policing and then follow up on the takedown notices and resend them. So that's, it's one of the tools, but unfortunately it's not as effective as we would like it to be. And then if a company continues not to respect takedown notices or is egregiously violating copyright law by building a business based on music and they're not paying the creators for it, then there's always, bringing a lawsuit for copyright infringement. And we do a lot of that. And ultimately, where we like to end up is in a place where there's settlements and licensing so that everybody continues to benefit. But we more licenses so that people can use music and use it fairly.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. You know, litigation is not a cost-effective way to deal with business issues. But the fair use doctrine figures into all of this. It's the most difficult area of American jurisprudence I can possibly imagine. And trying to balance the scales between encouraging creativity and free speech on the one hand and protecting on the other is a very, very difficult process for the creators sitting in co-writing and sitting in the studio, and for a million other business interactions that take place. The one thing that I wanted to pick up that Todd said, to quickly finish this, is that in terms of the fair use doctrine, there's been a lot of talk on the Hill, even this past week, about, gee, if we can only expand the fair use doctrine and take the shackles off new technology to be able to move forward, then America would have a competitive advantage over the rest of the world. That is wholly counterintuitive. If you make copyrighted material available to everyone without license and take away copyright protection, then you've leveled the playing field, and all you've succeeded in doing is taking away the ability of creators to make a living. It does not move technology forward. So picking up on what Shannon said, yes, the licensing systems that we put in place have to drive technology as well as commerce, but we cannot throw out the babies with the bathwater.
So I think one of the issues that's really interesting, you know, if you are an artist signed with a major label or a major publisher, they have the resources to go out and enforce your rights, and they have a financial incentive of doing so. It's one of the big pros or virtues of being with a major label or publisher when you have that debate over, you know, are they good or bad, right? But I'm curious for you, like, what does enforcement look like at your label and with your artists, and what are the challenges you can?
Good question. For the independents too, we absolutely get involved in enforcement, and unfortunately, it often does come down to litigation. It's a nightmare. It's incredibly expensive for everybody involved. And we've been on both sides of it. We've had to defend against litigation, and we've also had to initiate litigation in order to resolve infringement claims. And there's a lot of frivolous infringement claims out there, by the way. Not just on music, like it could also be on artwork or the name of a band, for example. But I guess the answer is, yeah, we get our hands dirty and we get involved when we have to. I mean, ideally, you can work it out through arbitration or discussion, or by coming to some kind of financial settlement. But way too often, it ends up going to court.
We should know too, the Copyright Claims Board is a new development in the Copyright Office. There's now a small claims court that if you have claims, I want to say under 30,000.
Yeah.
Make sure I have that number.
Very good.
You can go to the Copyright Office and they have attorneys to help you, and then you don't have to hire outside legal representatives. And that hopefully will make enforcement easier and more cost-effective for small creators.
And accessible for small creators.
Yes.
I'm embarrassed to say, but I learned about this today from the agenda. I looked up CC. What is this? And
It's new.
It sounds like something that can be very useful.
It is very useful. So much information about it right here. We have a very talented team of folks that work on it. But yeah, I'll put its plug in the Copyright Claims Board. It's something that came out of the CASE Act, which had a lot of support in a way that collaborative with law does. From the other the legislation we were talking about earlier, and it asked the Copyright Office to set up a brand new tribunal for smaller claims for copyright infringement and related claims. And this is a big deal because at the end of the day, it can bring people to that settlement, help you make a deal, and it's something that is designed to lower the barriers to entry. So it's voluntary, all virtual. You don't have to go anywhere. You can do it from your couch. There's low fees. There are all of the usual litigation-related steps to take and time to take for service and response, but it's designed to be accessible. And then running it for about 3 years now. It's going to turn 3 years old in June. We've had about 1,200 or so claims, and they are making their way through the process, and it's been pretty well received. So if any of you have any comments, we actually have an open notice of inquiry for feedback, because according to the law, we have to provide a report to Congress next spring. So stay tuned, and please do give us your feedback about it and use it if you haven't heard about it. We'll wait for your call. But thank you so much. All right, so before we wrap up and take any questions, if anyone has them, we were talking about how our policy focus, a lot of it is around AI. And like I said at the beginning, I really can't leave the room without talking about AI, even if I really try to go into it, not talking about it, it's gonna get in there. So we're going to set aside a little bit of time now for other copyright policy issues you or your organization are interested in, and if so, what are those? So I'll just start sort of in the middle and do that first. So I'll start.
Yeah, so AI has been a massive focus for us, obviously, but on the musical composition side, we have a lot of regulation, the compulsory license, on the reproduction right to the consent decrees that largely govern the performance right. So we're always interested in ways to improve the system for musical composition creators and owners. So one of the things that we're looking at right now is how can we make the copyright royalty board system more efficient and cheaper. We have to litigate against the major tech companies every 5 years to determine the rates for streaming, and it costs them tens of millions of dollars to do those proceedings every couple of years. So we're looking at ways to improve that system to make it more effective so that we can have fair rates without paying through the nose for it. And I think my colleague was here a second ago. I was looking to him to see if there was anything that I missed, but he's not here. So CRV.
I think on the copyright side specifically, yeah, on the sound recording side, it's ensuring that the public performance right for sound recordings applies to broadcast radio, which Patrick cares about as well. And then public performance right for songwriters, the work that the Copyright Office is currently doing, looking at performing rights organizations and oversight there, we're very interested in. But there's also a host of music issues that have nothing to do with copyright that are before Congress at the moment. Later today, the House is voting on legislation related to the live event ticketing marketplace. We've been involved in protecting freedom of expression for what we could say overzealous prosecutors, using creative expression as evidence in court. And then tax issues. There's a lot of talk about taxes on the Hill, and the tax code currently gives certain tax benefits to like film and television and stage production, and we've been looking at ways to apply similar benefits to independent artists and songwriters as well.
I'll just expand a little bit on the terrestrial performance right, try not to be boring, but I think that everybody probably knows that in the world, in all of the world, there is a public performance right for musical works. If a song is played on the radio, then the songwriter gets performed, and in most countries, the songwriter gets paid. In most countries, the performer also gets paid. And that is not the case in the United States. The United States has an exemption for not digital radio, so the performer gets paid via sound exchange if your recording is played on digital radio such as Pandora or Sirius XM is covered. But for all normal terrestrial radio, they pay nothing to the performer. They only pay the songwriter due to an exemption that was negotiated, Charlie, you would probably know this, in the 20s or something? 30s?
He's not that old.
So that's it. The performance right goes back to 1909.
Okay, right. So it's waived in the United States only. And this has a bigger effect than you would think because there's a system of reciprocal payments for artists around the world. So performing artists who are not American but can basically collect a lot more money than Americans can, or for recordings that were made in the United States. So this is legislation that needs to be fixed to put us on par with the rest of the world.
I certainly agree with Shannon. For very different reasons, and CRV reform is incredibly important. And we definitely need to work together on that. We cannot be afraid to change and tinker with stuff that we know is broke, and the CRB is broken. I think that the MLC and the MMA as it applies to it may need some tweaks as well. And we want to, keep that front of mind. Site blocking, though, is something that we, I think, all agree on. Nobody wants to block sites that have a legitimate purpose. If a foreign site has no purpose whatsoever other than to provide the opportunity to steal, there's really no free speech defense to that. And, the No Fakes Act, I think it's important. It's really a trademark issue rather than a copyright issue. It's important to our fellow creators, on the recording side as well. But we want to remind you that if you're thinking that will resolve AI issues for the entire panoply of creators, it won't. But our community does support that. So,
just to clarify that, if the digital replicas really, sure.
I would say, we're looking closely at the comments that have been submitted for the PRO, and obviously we submitted comments ourselves. I've watched with great interest over the years the many times that the consent decrees have been going to disappear, yet they're still here. And I really think we live in an industry that's overregulated for what essentially, from the Department of Justice, wants to see, in most cases, competition and free enterprise. I think we'd have a healthier industry if there was no consent decrees. I think the market is now settled enough that it could find this idea of willing buyer, willing seller quite happily. And I can't think of another industry where you can use the product before you've decided what you're paying for it. And that's essentially what we have at the moment. I'd love to see that go.
Just because of where we are time, and have each of you can certainly comment on that if you'd like, of course, but each of you provide one last thought to the room. I think the more you can keep it tied to what is important, something that you would like to give music as creator, users of being this a bond or increment or a research level, and that'll bring us. Start with you.
My thought, again, as a person that's involved in music education, is just making music education more accessible, and not just the craft portion, but the business of music. I feel like it's almost intentionally convoluted and confusing, and most creatives don't understand it, and I think that's problematic. Even creatives who have been created a long time have a general understanding. But again, I started a company like 5 years ago just to teach, the business of music, because I'm realizing how many artists don't know it, and they rely on their management, and possibly the management might know it, maybe, or they know some fashion of it. And it's always evolving and changing, so it's like, who is even an expert anymore, right? So that's all I would leave with. It's like, I would love to work with anyone here who wants to help provide more transparent music education to our next generation of creatives, so they actually know what's going on. From the beginning, they can build a strong music business foundation from the beginning, not 3 albums in after you've been robbed and heartbroken and disillusioned, then you're trying to learn it, but like early on, it's everyone's right. Like every other business that you go into, you learn how that business works when you go into it. So yeah, that's all I feel really strongly about. I love to partner with anyone here. I do conferences for young artists all the time. So yeah,
All right, so we'll just go.
I just I almost want to go back to the very beginning and just reiterate something. What we do, and I say we musically, but all artisans, it's a reflection of culture. It's a reflection of a moment in time. Going back to cave paintings, going back to people chiseling things in walls, and it's a reflection of what's happening in time. All the way through, you can go through historically, you go through the Jazz Age, you can go through the Vietnam era protest songs, you can go through everything. It's a reflection of our society. If we lose that ability, whether it be through music, through text, through painting, through photography, whatever it is, if that goes away because of AI, forget the economics. Society will really be diminished as a humanity. And that is so important, and we should never lose sight of it in this AI discussion. Because as soon as that creation stops, those machines have no fodder. They have nothing to live on. Those machines are going to dry up. So that's why we have to keep doing what we do.
Yeah, to build on that, but we've established music is an important part of our lives. It's something that builds us up. We've discussed there are certain things that Congress and policymakers like the Copyright Office can do to build up music and improve the lives of music creators, and we need them to do that. And I think it's the last mile, so to speak, of closing the gap is the involvement of real artists and creators getting involved and using their voices to make that change happen.
Yeah, agreeing with that, and building on that, I think my one takeaway that I would say is if you want to be able to continue to enjoy human-made art and human-made music and to have people be able to make a living as artists and musicians, what we really need from Congress and policymakers is protection of copyright and incentivizing licensing when copyright is used in new ways and in the face of new technologies.
Well, that really sums it up, Shannon. I agree with Mumu that music business education is needed, and it is such a mystery to so many people, and absolutely to managers and to other professionals that we deal with. I would add to that music education is really important. And music education does not exist in elementary schools the way that it did even when I was growing up. I don't know whether that's something that Congress can address, but it is absolutely important.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Putting on my hat for the National Music Council. Yeah, I mean, having an educated public is so important. Music has saved way more kids, and I play football, has saved so many more kids than football, that there's really no comparison. And it makes for a smarter, more sensitive, more intuitive population of citizens. And that is really important because one of the byproducts of AI is better propaganda. And if we don't have transparency and know whether it's a machine talking to us or another human being, I mean, sure, it's going to be very hard to fall in love to a song that you know is written by a machine. That's a given, but I'm sorry, we need to know as members of the public, and we also need to know if a political speech or a PSA has been written by a machine and is attempting to steer us in one direction or the other without a human element to discuss it with.
So, human element, education, more education, a little more education, a little bit of policy, and a little bit more of human creation. I think that wraps us all up. I want to thank the Copyright Alliance and all of you. Just do a quick plug-in for all of the Copyright Office's music resources online. I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah. So thank you all for attending. Hopefully you learned something from it. I know I did, and I know at least one panelist learned it as well. And thank the panelists and for you all attending, and of course for Miriam for doing a great job moderating. Appreciate it. So thank you very much.